Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Cucchiara, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome in. Good afternoon. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon as we roll towards the weekend. If it's Friday, it means that, guess what? It's the three of us. No, not the Three Stooges. These are the people that give you the education information on Friday, and we always have good stuff for you, if I say so myself, alongside Bobbi and Buddy. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great, thank you.
Fabulous.
Good to be together. We're on a roll, huh? 3 or 4 weeks in a row.
3 or 4 weeks in a row. But that's going to change.
That's going to change. That's right. It will change. That's all right. We're busy people doing a lot of good stuff, so that will change. We'll keep people posted. Just a reminder for those tuning in, you can listen to us a couple different ways. One is on the radio at KDOW 1220 AM. You can listen to us online during the time of 3 to 4 here, Pacific Daylight Time. You could listen at kdow.biz. Click the big button that says Listen Live. You can listen to us anywhere, no matter where you are, if you have an online connection, that is. Lastly, we'd love to have you download the app and the podcast. That way you can listen to the show anywhere. We're getting several hundred downloads a day, and we want to continue to grow that. It's amazing how many people now are contacting me and emailing and saying, hey, I listened to the podcast.
Isn't that fun?
It used to be, I listened to your show. Now it's, I listened to the podcast. So it's working.
I know. It is. They love it without the commercials.
Yeah, that's right.
And it must be something about the cachet of Silicon Valley, because China's downloading it, England's downloading it, Germany's downloading it.
Well, that's because all the visits that you and Bobbi make to all these international countries.
All right. Threaten them with download our podcasts or else.
But we would love to have you continue to do that, and that number of different ways you get that. RERadiolive.com is the website, or you go to iTunes, Stitcher, all the places. You could download that app and follow the show. We are a live show. We always love your questions and interaction. There's 2 ways to communicate during the show. 1-800-516-1220, or you could call Bobbi, or text, I should say. What's the text, Bobbi, if they want to text?
650-346-5352.
So 2 ways to communicate with us during the show. That's the way to do it. Again, the focus is education and information. We work really hard to have great guests like we do today. We'll introduce in just a minute, and really just deliver great content and information to you, the consumer, to help you make wise decisions in and around your real estate. With that, I will turn it over to Bobbi. Bobbi, who's our special guest today?
Well, today we have Steve Blanton, who is the CEO of the San Mateo County Association of Realtors, known as SAMCAR. And the topic we're going to be discussing is rent control, because it has reared its head again, and it's a critical topic, particularly where the issue is going to appear on our ballots in several cities in the Bay Area this coming November. They were able to get them on. And so our objective today is to provide, again, Joe, information, education that's going to help everybody listening to us gain a deeper understanding of this issue known as rent control.
That's right.
So, Steve, before we get into all these details, give us some insight into your background and how you got here.
Thank you for having me here again, Bobbi and Buddy and Joe. And
welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Good to have you back again, second time. Yeah,
that's right.
Well, to answer your question, Bobbi, I grew up in Los Gatos in the Bay Area, and I spent the better part of my life there. I had the opportunity to run for town council in Los Gatos, served 12 years as a council member, vice mayor, and mayor of the town of Los Gatos. I actually taught community college, one of my earlier iterations as a public speaking instructor, argument and debate, and so on. And then I got involved in real estate. I became government affairs director for the local real estate association. And later I just moved up into executive director and CEO positions, and have been now at SAMCAR for a little over 6 years. And I believe I'm now the longest tenured CEO in SAMCAR history.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
That's right. I say that every morning.
But there's a wonderful distinction about are real estate associations and normal associations. Can you give us a little bit of that insight? Because it's not always just about our members.
That's right. I mean, in the end, it is about the members. I mean, you want to service the members, and that's the common thread that all associations have. I think realtor associations differ in the sense that there's really a public mission there, and realtor associations, particularly the San Mateo County Association of Realtors, has really taken on the role of being the defender of property rights. Several years ago, our board of directors said that rent control was one of the things that really would erode property rights, and they charged us as staff, me as the CEO of the Government Affairs Department, and really the whole organization, to be out there fighting rent control if it ever came up. So as these battles, these skirmishes have occurred, we've been right in the forefront there. There have been 11 attempts in San Mateo County at the city council level to pass rent control in some form, and we've let the citizens of the communities involved know. They have come out, they've expressed their displeasure with this idea of rent control, and those 11 instances, they've been defeated 11 times.
Well, it's a complicated and complex issue, even though it sounds so easy. Control rent, right? But that's not it at all. I mean, it's so far-reaching. It's kind of like tentacles on an octopus. It gets into everything.
So give us kind of an overview. I think when most people hear this, they, Steve, they think, okay, rent control. Some people, it may go right over the top of their head. Others might scratch their head and go, what does that mean? And is it different in each county and area? Because, I've heard people say, in different cities and places that it's unlimited, or is that true? Or maybe landlords or people are just getting away with it, not knowing. So maybe give us a little overview of rent control and what it's supposed to do and the purpose.
Sure. I don't have to tell you that we live in a very expensive area. I know you have a wide audience throughout the country, throughout the world. Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area really is one of the most expensive areas to live in, period, anywhere. And consequently, when you have people that really make communities work, like teachers, firefighters, police officers, nurses, doctors even, finding a place to live can be a real challenge, and fitting it into your budget could even be a bigger challenge sometimes. Right. So I think with all of that scarcity out there, people hear the words rent control and think, hey, that's a great idea. Here's a way that we could get these people that we need to be here in our community. They're part of our community now. We don't want to lose them. In many cases, they're a part of the community. If not, if there's people that need to move in, maybe this will help that. So I think superficially people look at that and think that that's a great idea, but when you stop and sort of dig down underneath, you begin to see that there's really a lot of issues there. These two measures that are on the ballot in San Mateo County, one in the city of San Mateo, the other in Burlingame. Burlingame is Measure R, San Mateo is Measure Q. Both of them really have a lot of things that I think voters ought to be concerned about. They create the establishment of an unelected kind of super government to enforce the rent control ordinance. That's number one. Number two, they also have kind of first call at city funding. They could go into the city treasury really without limitation and take whatever they need to administer this program. So you could have a situation where there's millions of dollars being taken for this program, and you don't have enough money for vital city services like police, like fire, like repairing roads, like making sure your libraries are modern and up to date, and so forth.
Yeah, and just what we don't need is another bureaucracy.
Well, that's right. And so with that establishment of a bureaucracy, I think you see an erosion of private property rights. And that doesn't just apply to people that are renting out their property right now. That could really affect single-family homeowners. It could affect really everyone in a community when rent control is passed in a negative way.
Well, we had that conversation just before we got on the air about the fact that once they start to take away property rights that are so essential to us here in the United States, makes us so different from so many other places in the world, it's a slippery slope.
It absolutely is, buddy. And another thing with these measures, Rent control itself is one thing. There's an awful lot of other provisions in both these measures. There's something called just cause eviction, and that's a term that sounds pretty good. You got to have a pretty good reason to get somebody out. But what that really means when you look down underneath that is that a person, in many instances, is going to have to be convicted of a crime before you can move them, and even then you have to go through this. You have to go through this long process. Even then, so imagine you live in a certain neighborhood right now. If you're a property owner, if you're a landlord, you do a background check on people that are going to come into your property. You want to be sure that they're not going to be causing problems. You want to be sure that they can hopefully pay the rent on time, those sorts of things. So if you have this situation now and somebody comes in and they cause a problem, it's the real world here. Sometimes people deal drugs. Sometimes people do other bad things. They do violent things. We've had incidents where people in San Francisco have told us they've had rent control for a long time, and they've told us that people could go around brandishing weapons at other individuals in their apartment complex, and they still can't get them out because they're not convicted of a crime. They can't get them out. And plus, I mean, if you have somebody that, is sticking a gun in your face or showing you a knife or something of that, are you going to feel very comfortable going and making a complaint? And it could be 6 months or a year before you even have the chance to remove this person.
Yeah, lots of complexity. Lots of complexity.
And homeowners, we always say, buy something, whether you start with a condo, whatever it is, because that's going to be the cornerstone of building your wealth base. And here we go, and we say that, and some of the seniors have believed in that, Steve, and now they're older, they're in homes, nursing homes, and they're renting their places out. How are they going to prove this kind of thing? I mean, that puts such a burden on people who believed in America, bought American, and now what? This over-regulation is going to kill us.
Well, that's exactly right. You have a situation right now without rent control where you have a lot of mom-and-pop individuals, people like you're describing, Bobbi, that bought property for an investment. In many instances, they manage the property themselves. There's not that big a margin there for them to be able to hire somebody. So in the scenario that you describe, having somebody in a rest home, essentially, I don't know of any other way that they could accomplish that other than to have a professional be there, probably involve an attorney. We all know how much attorneys charge to take care of problems for you. We all know how long and convoluted the legal process is as well at this point. So it really does not only add another layer of bureaucracy and burdensome costs, it adds a lot of time, a lot of frustration, I think, for everybody involved, not just landlords, but the surrounding neighbors as well.
Sure. Part of the conversation here, you're really talking about a neighborhood can be destroyed. With the wrong kind of management of a situation or lack of any management of a situation.
Well, that's right. And you look at the areas where there are things such as just cause eviction, and this is not just idle chatter. I mean, they provide very good examples for what we're talking about. You have a situation where you have everybody in an area knows who the drug dealers are, but you can't get them out because they have these sorts of protections. And if you've ever been on some of the government lists and checked out sex offenders and so forth, same thing there as well.
Right. All right, we're going to have to take a quick break, and thank goodness, because this is good stuff, good information. If you have any questions for Steve, rent control, maybe you're not sure, anything, that's what we're here for. 1-800-516-1220. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes to continue.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
Working and living in a global world often means you need competence, intelligence, and connectivity that can assist you to optimize results everywhere in your life. This is true in business, your lifestyle, and your living environments. When this means changes in your property requirements, Bobbi Decker and her team, working with the Sotheby's International Realty Network, can assist in optimizing your results. If you have residential real estate requirements in the San Francisco Bay Area or around the world, contact Bobbi. If the property needs are not in her area of expertise locally, she will vet the Sotheby's Realty agents in the appropriate area of the globe where you need expert assistance. For more information or assistance, contact Bobbi at 650-346-5352. Visit her website at www.bobbidecker.com or email Bobbi.Decker@sotheby'srealty.com.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live, sitting alongside Buddy and Bobby. Here we are on a Friday, getting ready to roll into the weekend. Our guest today is in studio, Steve Blanton, who is the CEO of San Mateo County Association of Realtors, kind enough to spend some time with us today talking about rent control. And very, very good topic, and one that you should pay attention to if you're a renter or if you're thinking about it or moving to this area, because it is super expensive, and there's a lot of dynamics around it. It's easy just to say, why isn't there rent control and how come, but there's so much that goes into it. So Steve's here to explain that with us, and I will turn it over to Buddy.
Yeah, we had kind of a long list of very interesting things about what rent control does that aren't necessarily positive.
Yeah.
And we actually hadn't even finished the list. I think part of what we talked about, Steve, with these two measures, Q and R, I don't think we put the number on it in that first segment, but the reality of it is you've got an estimated $3 million of additional potential cost associated with it. And that doesn't even necessarily cover a couple of these other attributes of what these programs could bring on board and what they could do to make things worse. How about a couple more points in that regard?
Sure, and you're absolutely right on that number, Buddy. But in addition to that immediate cost, you could almost count on the fact that for people that are injured in this, they will take legal action against the city for this. So, defending that is not easy. It's not cheap. It consumes resources. It consumes time. So that would be another drawback, I would think, as well.
And could consume substantially more money. If you've ever been engaged in a lawsuit, that can get very complex and very cash draining very quickly.
Absolutely correct. And then one thing that I think is overlooked just in terms of how this affects all segments of the community, there's a state law called Costa-Hawkins which prohibits the application of rent control to single-family homes, and it also says that anything that's built in 1995 or after is not subject to rent control. So if you have a community, for instance, that has, say, half of its rental stock prior to 1995, they have frozen rents at that point. If you have the other half that the rents are not frozen at that point, can you imagine what will happen to those renters in those post-1995 apartments? Or they could see their rents go up very drastically because you have to make up that income from someplace.
Someplace, yes. Well, it just adds complexity every which way. All these, what we've all talked about before, is these unintended consequences of these presumably well-meaning activities, but the unintended consequences can be dramatic. And one of the scenarios is that you had mentioned earlier in a conversation was, does this really address some of the problem about what are we going to do to get more affordable housing? This actually can put a damper on that, can't it? Yeah,
it can, and there are, I think everybody recognizes that housing is an issue here, and there certainly are avenues to be able to deal with that. This does not add one more unit of housing to the housing stock in San Mateo County and Santa Clara County, wherever it's tried. It's not going to add one more unit. And so I think you want to think about sensible alternatives to that, bearing in mind that there's, as we talked about earlier, there's affordability issues and so forth. But there are, in our area, we have HIP housing, we have Habitat for Humanity, we have many other vehicles to help produce affordable housing for individuals that need it.
Wouldn't it be better to put all of our focus there instead of perhaps the unintended consequences?
Well, that's right. Instead of this $3 million a year for to hire people to police the community about rents, maybe we ought to be looking at how do we make individuals' housing more affordable with that $3 million.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a good thing to do?
It's a good point. So in that, as we kind of follow through that same theme, not all the landlords have played fair, though. So how do you govern or police that? Or is it impossible, or you just hope that people are good citizens in the way they minister there as a landlord? That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. But realistically, in any human endeavor you're going to look at, you're going to find that there are not there are some bad actors
sure.
in
no matter
any
where
of
you
that.
are. Yeah.
So, and that, landlords are not excluded from that, but there are existing laws at the state level and in many cities, municipalities that already address this, that give people an avenue to say, I've been treated unfairly. And people, may be worried about being evicted for complaining. Well, you have protections against that as well. So maybe we're looking to solve a problem that isn't as big a problem as people would like to make it in that regard.
That sledgehammer approach.
That's right. Yeah.
Let me see. There's a flea on my table. Boom.
Or a flea on my leg, and let me use the sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer. Oh yeah. Oops. Kneecap.
Ow.
I know. It's just finesse. It's finesse. Some people are just... I've got a great story about a property I once owned when we come back from break, and how hard it was to deal with the situation that came up. It was just impossible, and that was 20 years ago.
Well,
so I cannot imagine the complexity now.
There are plenty of stories out there. I've been fortunate so far, but I've heard all kinds of horror stories. And you had mentioned, Steve, it's the tough thing is it's really difficult getting someone out when they don't want to get out too. That's a really tough one for sure.
And when we come back, ask me about relocation payments, because
good idea.
Something
Okay.
to talk about.
Oh yes, we won't forget that, Steve.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation as rent control. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or maybe you have some stories of your own, Bobby's going to share one with us. 1-800-516-1220. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live, sitting alongside Bobby and Buddy. Conversation topic today is rent control, and we have an expert here to talk to us about that, Mr. Steve Blanton, CEO of San Mateo County Association of Realtors. Rent control, big topic. We're covering it as much as we can, and if you are a renter out there, it's good to be educated. Again, that's what we do. That's what we want to do. If you have any questions, 1-800-516-1220, and I will roll it over to Bobby.
Well, my little story, I'm just going to really put it in encapsulated form, was many years ago, about 20 years ago, I had a one-bedroom, one-bath that I owned as an income-producing property, and the person just disappeared. He had been a wonderful tenant, but then suddenly just disappeared. And so after a certain amount of months, you can claim abandonment, and then you go to court, and you get court orders, and then you basically start selling off all the stuff that was abandoned, quote-unquote, in the storage center or up in the apartment, and lo and behold, relatives came out of once it was published in the paper, and they said, oh, no, he's not gone, he died. He didn't just abandon it, he died. So now it doesn't work. The procedure you use for someone who's died is not the procedure you use for someone who was abandoned, but that was 20 years ago, and needless to say, I'm not a big conglomerate, I'm not an LLC, I'm just a single investor who outgrew the place, and I sold it. I was just like, this is ridiculous. I got no rent for 12, 15, 18 months.
Wow.
The costs of going and hiring an attorney, getting it to that. And so, Steve, with this whole little story comes my questions about these quote-unquote relocation payments. That's a scary, scary thought.
Yes, and both Measure R in Burlingame and Measure Q in San Mateo contain provisions for relocation payments. Burlingame's Measure R, has a 3-month time frame in which you were supposed to pay relocation benefits to someone that moves out of a unit. Now, you talked about folks like you who are the mom and pop folks that have 1 or 2 units, and if, like you were saying, you have a good tenant, you're not there necessarily to maximize everything. You're happy. You want to keep them there. You want to keep them happy. So maybe you don't raise rents for a period of years. that the relocation payments don't take that into account. You have to pay the replacement cost, the average cost. So you might be way under market. You might be $1,000 a month under market, but then you've got to somehow find the additional money to pay them.
But explain relocation costs. I mean, even that simple.
Well, so
how do they compute that?
They use an average. They use an average of what the market rate is for a similar unit. And so with Burlingame, at least that's defined. With San Mateo, the measure says that will be defined later. So it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be, we don't know what that is, what that number is. And the other part of that, Bobby, about relocation payments, there's no means testing to it. So somebody that does not need the money to find a new place, you're still required to pay that. You could have somebody working at Facebook or Google that just cashed in a bunch of stock options.
And they're gone.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So you're still required to pay them.
Oh, my.
So what kicks this in? What kicks in this? That you ask the tenant to leave, or does the tenant come and say, I'm leaving and I want you to pay for my move?
Well, I know the way that it's been discussed is that if the property owner asks the tenant to leave, then they have to pay relocation payments. In some communities, and I apologize, I don't know the specific answer for these two, but in some communities, I know that no matter why the individual leaves, you still have to pay relocation payments.
Oh, my. That just sounds...
I mean, talk about having a glut of property. Any of you haven't been able to buy in the last 5 years, just wait if these measures get through.
Well, between the break, we were talking about that issue, and San Francisco's had this rent control for quite some time, and Steve, you mentioned something very shocking.
That's right. I mean, if you want to see an example of the wonders of rent control, there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of vacant rental units in San Francisco that the owners just, they're waiting for the last person to move out of the property so they could do something else with their building.
It's amazing.
So, we talk about a housing shortage. If we didn't have rent control in place, maybe we wouldn't even have a housing shortage because we'd have all these other units that would be available.
Yeah, exacerbating the problem. Yeah.
I would guess most people don't know that.
No.
They'd never guess that
Yeah.
it's sitting vacant.
Right.
It's a lot of that in San Mateo, too.
Is that really?
Mm-hmm. Not probably tens of thousands, but it's around.
Well, all right. We learn something every single day, and especially when we have experts on. So we will take another quick break, and we'll come back. We'll continue our conversation about rent control. If you have any questions, 1-800-516-1220. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Joe Cucchiara, Real Estate Radio Live, sitting alongside Bobbi and Buddy. I believe we have a caller on the line, Brian in San Mateo. Brian, are you there?
Yes, I am, yeah.
How are you, Brian?
Hold on, somebody else talking. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a question. I have property in San Mateo and in San Francisco. Just to give an example, I bought a building there 2 years ago in the city with a tenant that was there for 45 years, paying $495 for a one-bedroom, one parking space, and he's been there 45 years. I won't touch him. He's all the way up to 511 right now. So, the new tenant who moved in across the way is paying $2,200. But the problem in the city is you're tied to 60% of the consumer price index, which is only $2 or $3 a year that you're allowed to raise. So once you get a tenant in place, you might as well marry them because they're locked in for life.
That's a funny way to put it, Brian.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, this guy's paying $2,200, and the guy across the hall is paying $495. Now he's up to $511. But it'll take another 40 years to get up to $2,200. And
that's amazing.
Two of these 4 units are subsidized. I had to put down 50% in order for the bank to qualify it. I was looking for a tax deduction.
Oh my God, you're kidding me! So it just keeps getting better.
They go on the proposed rent. With locked-in tenants, there's no chance for inflation to help you out there, so you can't even sell the building very easily when it comes time to sell. And also,
and your expenses aren't capped, I imagine, so they're not restricted to 2 or 3% a year. And oftentimes, Brian, what I've seen in cities. Go ahead.
Yeah, the other cities allow you 5% and more, but San Francisco, 60% of the consumer price index, which is around 1 or 2%. It never goes over 2%. And then you have Section 8.
Sometimes even city fees will eat that up. I mean, they raise the fees, and boom, you're done at that point.
Yeah,
well, this is...
it doesn't give you incentive to change the carpet, to fix the unit, because some of
Exactly.
Flea bitten, and it's just impossible to work around it. And they're contaminating the whole building and upsetting the people who are paying high rent. The low rent ones are causing more problems without even causing a problem. Just the state of the unit and the state of everything is just unreal.
Well, Brian, this is what Steve, Steve was talking about as an example, because I think there is a perception out there, I would bet, right, with the media. Oh my God, everybody's paying $5,000 a month. You can't get a place for rent. I mean, and you hear stories like this. That's why I'm glad you called in and you offered your advice and feedback.
And I have 2 elderly people there, and I won't touch them. I have a family of 6 kids. I would never put one of my own family in to replace an older tenant. We need to keep the character of the neighborhoods. I understand that. But the unfairness of the bureaucrats not letting you raise it 3, 4, 5%, something reasonable. But there's no reasonability in this city. It's crazy. So I advise people to buy property in the city unless you're a multi-millionaire.
There you go. Listen to Brian. That came on.
I have another one last year. The same thing. A person was paying $1,100. They moved out. I got $2,750. I have another one coming up at the 1st of October. $2,000. I'll get $3,500 for it.
Wow. Hey, Brian.
And it's the young people that crucify it.
Where are you going to invest? Where are you going to invest next time in property?
Not San Francisco.
I'm investing all the time because I've lived and worked here for 40 years, so I know the ins and outs.
Good for you.
I know what I'm facing when I get into it, so, it's okay. But people who are blindly going in to buy, to try to put some money into something, to do a 1031 exchange and come into some of these properties in the city, they're barking up the wrong tree. And the same thing is going to happen in Birmingham or San Mateo or wherever else, to bring in this rent control list to give them a sensible increase, regardless of how long you're there. But to tie you down to 6% of the consumer price index at 1% to 2%, I mean, it's impossible.
Well, Brian, you actually bring up a pretty important point that the reality of these programs don't always serve the people they're supposed to serve.
Exactly.
We have another story of one of our board members in Samcar has a property that maybe you could tell us a little bit about, Steve, where it's actually the other way around, where these people have an extraordinary income and they have a rent control unit.
Right. Well, rent control in San Francisco was passed as an emergency measure in 1978. It's supposed to be temporary in 1978, right? So it's still there, and people that were renting in 1978 just have incredibly low rent. If you think about what things cost in 1978, that would be reflected in their rent. So now you have people in the Bay Area, 2-income earners, very well paid. In some cases, the one example you're referring to, buddy, it's $850,000 a year that they make, but they still have the type of rent that Brian was talking about.
That's ridiculous.
Isn't that amazing?
There's people down at the studios. Friends of mine have studios down in the marina getting $2,500 for studios. And I have 2,000 square foot of 1,300 square foot units that I'm only getting $2,000 for, because the people are there for so long. They're 20 years, some of them now, and I'm stuck. Actually, this one building is not rent control because I built it, but the other ones, once you buy them in place and you get Section 8 tenants thrown in with them, you have compounded problems all the way around. So I never buy a building with any more than one Section 8 tenant in place. I just wouldn't do it. One is sufficient. I won't take 2.
We're gonna have to get right. Brian, have you been listening to the show for a while?
Oh yeah. I listen as often as I can because I'm driving my truck around and I'm doing inspections daily. So I listen and I get some good information from you guys too.
Well, thanks for the call. We got to go, but I'll tell you, I want to thank you because you're a very intelligent, not only intelligent consumer, but he obviously knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and helps understand this issue in a first-hand kind of way.
Exactly. Thank you,
Brian.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Okay,
thanks, Brian.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Yeah, that was great. We're going to take a break here in a bit, but on the other side, we could talk more about that. It's great. It was great that he called in. Here's a consumer, right, and a property investor, an owner, firsthand telling us, because I don't know that some people know this side of it. I really don't. I'm not sure that the news share. I don't hear this much about. This side of it.
But you heard he said he was taking care of the family with 6 kids, and not pushing their rent up. Mm-hmm. But he can't get a fair break on one unit because the guy's been there since the beginning of time.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Something else.
Well, when we come back, we really have to have Steve talk about how these are going to pop up on the ballot and what people should do, Steve, because this last 4 minutes, educate.
That's right. Here we go. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. One more segment. We're going to finish up. If you have any questions, 1-800-516-1220. This is Joe Cucchiara. We'll be back with you to finish up in just a couple minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Just a couple minutes left here. The topic today is rent control, and it's a very popular topic. And because of that, we will be back in October to have kind of a part 2 of this series because there's a lot of demand. I think Brian, who called in the earlier segment, really spoke well about some examples. I don't think people hear enough about that side of it. So with a couple minutes left, Steve, maybe you could kind of give the listeners an idea. What can we do? I mean, what can a consumer do? What can a renter do? What can a landlord do? What type of proactive things can we do?
Yeah, and there's so much that we really haven't had a chance to talk about. Like both these measures allow for tenants to sublet to other tenants without the landlord's permission. So again, you don't have any background check. You don't know who these individuals are. So just a lot more to go into. So I'm glad we're going to do another segment. But to answer your question, Joe, we have measure-q.com. We have measure-r.com. So folks could go there. They could get more information. They could sign up to be active in the campaign. They could get yard signs. They could walk precincts. They could make phone calls if they're so inclined. They could make a donation to help defray the expenses of the campaign. The most important thing, I think, is to be sure that you're registered to vote and to vote against Measure Q if you're in San Mateo, Measure R if you're in Burlingame. Okay.
And they could go to, did you say Measure Q and MeasureR.com? Or
it's Measure-Q.
Oh, dash Q, okay.
And Measure-R.
Very good.
Yeah, there's lots of other things where we could focus some of those energy and some of that money, things to do, and Steve mentioned a couple of them earlier. But if we want to be proactive in a serious way and help this issue, you mentioned HIP Housing. They do some very serious things about providing under market rate housing for people. They also have a market sharing program where people can come in and rent a room in a home. There was such a good program that San Francisco has just very recently adopted the HIP housing program to make sure that they could provide some of that sharing capability across the city of San Francisco as well. So take a look at them. Take a look at, you mentioned Habitat for Humanity. There's all kinds of places where people are working to do good things around affordable housing. And look into that rather than worry about creating a whole series of unintended consequences.
Too much regulation. Stop it. Stop it.
The other thing, Steve, too, for those, because, we're covering, the radio show covers several, counties, Santa Clara, San Mateo, Alameda.
We're in San Francisco.
Yeah, and even part of Santa Cruz. Where would a person go, like if they're in Santa Clara or Alameda County, if they're dealing with some of these same issues? What would their first stop be? typically.
Yeah, of course, I'm most familiar with San Mateo County, but this is an issue that's springing up in many places in the Bay Area, all driven by the same folks that I think that it's a lifetime employment for Attorneys Act type of thing. But I think a good place to go would be your Realtor Association.
Okay.
The California Apartment Association certainly has a very strong stand on this as well, so I think they would provide you with more information and avenues to get involved with either of them.
Very good. All right. Well, we are going to have to duck out. Steve, I want to thank you for your time. Very, very valuable information, and we will definitely have part 2 next month. Buddy and Bobbi, always good. You guys,
always good.
Next Friday is going to be what, a surprise?
Yeah, well, we're coming from a different part of the country for the next 2 weeks.
Very good.
New part of the world we're going to explore for everybody.
Where's Waldo? It's Where's the B&B.
That's what you call a teaser. You got to check in to listen. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Tune in, log in, download our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com. RERadiolive.com.